Are you ready for some questions?
Sure, you bet.
All right. We're gonna go to Portland. Bruce, you are up with Shawn.
Shawn, first of all, I have to say a few things. I love the way you think. This world needs more people like you. I think we can all agree on that.
Well, thank you for saying that.
I'm also a chocoholic, by the way.
All right, I'm your man.
Yeah. So I have a couple of questions for you. I am a journalist, so that's what I do for a
Okay.
living.
All right.
First of all, are you familiar with the documentary Rotten, which did a segment on the chocolate business?
Yes.
And for those of you who haven't seen it, boy, it can be an unscrupulous practice, can it?
Yes, yes, yes. We're talking about enslaved children in the cocoa supply chain. Yeah. Did you have a question about it, Bruce?
I was wondering your reaction to that, and maybe you can enlighten others here who haven't seen that very powerful documentary.
Yeah.
How there's so much misery associated with such a wonderful product. They did segments too on avocados and other types of food and beverages, the water business as well. But I was so blown away by that I didn't know anything about that. But it's obvious to me that what you're doing, the practices that you're that you pride yourself on are so diametrically opposed to what's going on across the industry. So I was wondering your thoughts on that.
Yeah.
And kind of as a corollary, how does chocolate feed your soul?
Well, the things that I've been describing about. So one of the things that I talk about a lot and I say a lot, and I actually stole this from the craft beer industry. There was a guy, I want to say it might've been a journalist at the beginning of the craft beer movement, like in the early 90s, who said, it's not about the beer, it's about the beer. And so what I say is it's not about the chocolate, it's about the chocolate. And that's kind of confounding, but it's the truth. So all of this stuff, taking kids to Tanzania, opening my books, doing consolidated financial, that's not about chocolate. It's not. But yeah, it is. It is about chocolate. And so there's this kind of weird, I like to look at it in a non-dual perspective and say that it's connected to each other. And so for me, that moment when that young person said, what did I do to deserve this? And had that kind of aha moment that was emotional for her, then that's feeding my soul from this business. And when I visited a kindergarten in the Philippines this past January where we buy beans, and it was our 6th school lunch program that we had started in this kindergarten of all malnourished children. We have a donor, 2 sisters that support that group called A Beautiful Mess. They have a blog and they're kind of famous in the craft world, but A Beautiful Mess. They support the kindergarten to get fed. And when I go see these kids eating, and none of them now are severely malnourished the way they were when we started the program a year and a half ago, that feeds my soul. That feeds my soul. Now, to your original question. So to kind of not totally dominate I could talk about this for another hour, but both sides of this debate and litigation about the use of enslaved children in the supply chain agree that there's about 1.7 million children in Ghana and Ivory Coast that are currently in the supply chain, of which about 70% are involved in what's called the worst forms of child labor. So think 9-year-old with a machete, 10-year-old with a fertilizer backpack, and about 60, it depends on who you talk to, 60 to 75% of the world supply of beans comes from Ghana and Ivory Coast. We don't buy there, never have bought from there. We buy from Tanzania, Philippines, and Ecuador. And I have not, even in those countries that I buy, ever experienced children in the supply chain. Now, I worked on my grandparents' farm. I baled hay. I felt like I was enslaved sometimes, but that's not what that is. This isn't, my grandpa telling me to go out and milk the cows. That's not what this is. This is children who can't go to school, that are working dangerous jobs, and who often are paid nothing, or their families are paid nothing. And so when you realize that Mars, Mondelez, Nestle, Hershey, Barry Callebaut, the largest chocolate maker in the world in Switzerland, they are all sourcing their beans from there. Almost all of their beans come from this place. And so there was a lawsuit against them. There's multiple litigation about this, but the one that I was involved in went to the U.S. Supreme Court, and we were asked to be an amicus brief writer. And so we joined other chocolate makers, and then I sort of was a spokesperson for the group because of my law background. And we lost in the U.S. Supreme Court. In June of 21, the United States Supreme Court essentially gave Nestle and those other makers that I just told you license to use enslaved children in the supply chain. It's much more complicated than that. It's involving something called the Alien Tort Statute, so we are still fighting that. And it's very sad because the United Nations definition of extreme poverty is, it's changing now, but let's say it's $1.30, $1.40 a day. That's about what these farmers are making in Ghana and Ivory Coast, if they're lucky. You cannot live on $1.30 or $1.40 a day. And so people say, well, gee whiz, why is that Walmart chocolate bar $1.50 in the aisle, and it's twice the size of your chocolate bar, Shawn? Well, this is why. If you have slaves that you're not paying, then you're going to improve your margin, right? And many of these companies are publicly traded companies, and so they have a duty to the shareholder. And frankly, that duty to the shareholder will supersede almost everything up to, and by the way, all of these companies signed a treaty called the Harkin-Engel Protocol in 2003 and promised in writing that they would solve this problem. And they keep moving the goalpost. Now it's like 2030 by the time this is all going to be. And let me also say, Bruce, and this, one of the things that really disturbs me about this, well, okay, I'm going to say the thing that disturbs me, and then I'm going to give the good news at the end. What disturbs me is, for the most part, people don't care. And why I'm saying that is because in the news in the last 12 months, we've had documented examples of children working in factories in the United States, at Tyson and where I forgot where the other places were. People aren't, individuals, of course, are. Probably Bruce and I are upset, but how could this be in the United States? How could this possibly be that a child is cutting up chickens and we're not just freaked out about it? So if they're not freaked about it in the United States, they sure aren't going to care about it. And they're going to be like, oh, well, I'll just buy the Snickers bar, for $2. And kind of look the other way. And but I used to get really upset about that. Now I'm like, you know what? There's so many things to care about. Pick something. Ukraine, Gaza. Pick whatever it is, whatever side of the aisle you're on, there's something to care about and care about deeply. And so there's so much noise now that we have difficulty. We can be overwhelmed. We can really be overwhelmed by all of the things to care about. And all joking aside, I believe, and I study e-commerce a lot. I'm reading, because we have a big direct, you order from us, we'll ship it to you. We have a big direct to consumer business. And I am convinced that AI technology in the e-commerce space is going to help people like Bruce and I cut through all of the marketing BS that these companies, and many companies, spend millions and millions and millions of dollars to convince you that they're doing whatever it is, A, B, or C. And we'll find out the information that we need and that we want, and we'll be able to care about it, but it won't be so overwhelming to us because we're going to have the information that we need. So I think that's one of the things that AI is going to do for us, and sort of democratize the marketing space, because we will be bombarded by AI bots telling us what they think we want and what we need, but we will be able to shield that. Anyway, I could go on. The good news on this, Bruce, is that since the price has gone up, and even though the governments of Ghana and Ivory Coast regulate price, is corrupt, the government keeps a lot of the money, but they have raised the price to farmers. And as they have raised the price to farmers, we have seen a diminishment of the children in the supply chain. This is a good thing. And so if farmers can get more money, it's really expensive for us. We've raised prices once, but it's a killer on cash flow. You can imagine if something goes up, from 3,000 and then I'm all of a sudden paying 10,000 a ton, it's hard, but that's the good news. Really long answer to your question. But
that was phenomenal. We're